Just to set the stage, I'm sure everyone in this room has heard the term big data. It's all over the news. And data really has become the lifeblood of the advertising industry. It's all about putting the right message in front of the right person at the right time on the right device. And there are literally thousands of data sources out there, right? But I would argue that this little guy right here is the most powerful of all the data sources. The amount of data that as everybody here knows, that this device puts out, the exhaust of this device is truly enormous. And it can be used in many, many ways to improve the value of your inventory. And just to give you some example of that, a data-enhanced impression is improved in value anywhere from 100% to 500%. So if it's just a dumb banner ad, it's worth, let's just make it up, a nickel a thousand. But if we can then apply data to that impression gets to be worth anywhere between 10 and 25, sometimes even more cents per thousand. So it's significant. So that's sort of setting the stage, and really what we want to do here is give everybody a beginner's guide to how can you use data, what data elements are most important to make you, our developer partners, more money. So Mike, tell me a little bit about how Metamarkets interacts with the digital and mobile world, and what sort of data analytics do you provide that help developers and exchanges, frankly, make more money?
Sure. So, I guess first I would say that I think we all pay a lot of lip service to things like analytics, but when it comes to actually doing it, I think it's much harder than many of us realize. A lot of us look at like a pretty chart or a graphic and we say like, oh, okay, that's nice, how hard could that be? But we actually try to get into it and actually to build really robust reporting analytics for you guys as developers and publishers. I think many of you have probably found it is a bit trickier than you expected. So I guess I can say for us, where Metamarkets has filled a niche, I think a lot of folks have their core competency, and it may not be the development of rich visual analytics. It may not be buying a Vertica, a database. It may not be developing a streaming ingestion engine. And so typically, in the way we've worked with Millennial, and as it turns out, NextAge, Smato, many of the major mobile exchanges, MoPub as well, instead of you guys having to plug in directly to us, we work with the exchanges, and oftentimes they're able to provide you guys logins back to our product and our dashboards. And what it allows you to see is basic. I mean, I would say for us the biggest thing is just turn the lights on. So many people in the world of programmatic advertising are really flying blind, and they just having simple answers to questions like, how much money did I make yesterday? Is the new SDK causing a problem with my my yield? Which advertisers or which type of ad units are performing best? These very basic questions, most people lack the basic visibility into. And it's not just you guys. Frankly, many of the exchanges will sometimes see a drop or a spike, as many as a few percentage points. And their ad ops folks will use our tool just to get that visibility. So what I would just sort of advocate to all of you to think about is the more data that you put in, the more that you're going to get out. And tracking as many things as you can, either what you send to the exchanges or with your own systems. There's a blog post out there by the founders of Instagram where they said the key to their success as an app was that they instrumented everything. And if you search Instagram or instrumentation, you'll find they really went to the nth degree to measure everything that happened with their app, and I think that's one of the reasons they were successful.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to measurement. So John, thank you. John, you work with tons of agencies and advertisers.
Sure.
I know you and your team meet with them constantly,
yeah.
And you're talking about data targeting and you're talking about measurement. Just expound a little more about what advertising agencies are looking for when it comes to data.
Yeah, sure. So for us, I mean, all of you familiar with click-through rate as one of the biggest metrics, or now you have Nielsen and ComScore pushing for these audience verification metrics, right? Did I reach the right age and gender for my target? But if you're an auto manufacturer, they're moving less from am I trying to hit males in a certain age range to am I going to hit people who actually are going to buy my car? So we operate on a metric called buy-through rate instead. So we can look at various tactics of a campaign and understand, are the people being reached actually buying at a higher rate? So mobile kind of presents a whole bunch of new opportunities with things like location. Am I hitting people maybe who are near a dealer lot or in certain zip codes? But we can go just a step further and look at actual sales.
Yeah, that's great. And we didn't plan this, so that was another great segue to location. Jim, talk about the power of location.
And the answer is both, by the way. So I'm not saying.
A little bit about the power of location and what that means for an advertiser agency. What can be derived?
Yeah. Well, I think specifically mobile has opened up a very, very interesting opportunity over the last 5+ years, and it's accelerating. When we talked about location in the past, we've talked about that in the context of clickstream and geo-IP. And there are, I think one of the main things to consider is there are different qualities of location data. And the quality, as you get more and more granular, that quality opens up opportunities. So it's one thing to take a clickstream feed of IP addresses and get some level of accuracy at the city level. It's another thing to say, what block is this device in? And it's another thing to say, what store is this device in? And it's another thing to say, what aisle is this device in? And with each level of granularity, that kind of opens up additional opportunity for you to drive conversion and those kinds of things. You see on your Maps app, you see that translucent bubble. That's what's called a horizontal accuracy, and that kind of gives you an indication of the quality of location feed that your device has in that moment. But once you have this granular location through an SDK like Millennials, you're able to then really start to get very specific about both kind of performance-based advertising. Is this device within 3 minutes of a pharmacy, for instance? As well as, there's kind of this idea of taking a single point in time location observation against a single device. And that's kind of one set of opportunities. But then another set of opportunities is taking a stream of timestamp location data against that device and beginning to create audience segments out of that.
Yeah, and that's something we worked very closely with you on is when we launched Point, which is the ability for Millennial to serve an ad campaign that is not only location or geo-targeted, but also in the creative to tell that consumer how far they are from that particular store, which you think about the utility of that, and something Carrie touched on earlier, if you recall, when she was up here, she said, give the consumer utility and they'll be much more generous in the data that they provide. So I know that there are some apps that asking for location is a really scary thing, right? Like, why would I give XYZ app my location, right?
Location, right?
Yeah, like it doesn't make sense. But if there are ways to fit that into the context of the app or build utility into the app that requires location, I will guarantee you, whoever is responsible for monetizing here, Mr. Gillis, that you will make more money because location is the lifeblood of the mobile industry. So without teeing that up too much, Mike, you see trillions of data points a year, right? I mean, the data set that you guys have is absolutely massive. Probably something that I can't, so many zeros, it's hard to comprehend. So to put you on the spot, are there a couple of data elements that you see across all of your partners that sort of rise to the top? Like, what's the cream that that advertisers, or maybe not advertisers because you're not sure of that, but what's the cream that rises to the top of impressions that are worth more?
So I think clearly the power of programmatic and what what it offers for mid and long tail publishers, which I would imagine includes some of you guys here today, is the fact that we don't need to use publisher as a proxy for audience anymore. What we're really talking about with programmatic is the emergence of, frankly, the most complex marketplace ever created. It's a marketplace for human attention. And you guys have individuals that are on your apps using the things that you've developed who are just as valuable when they're using your app as they are when they're reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, which are commanding much higher premiums, much higher ad prices. So I think what we're really talking, the most valuable data point of all is the IDs. Who is this individual? And I think when you talk increasingly, to folks like Datalogix and the partners that you guys have, what brands want is they want to understand where are the people. Forget about what app they're using, or sometimes even where they are in time and space, but where are the people who recently took a test drive of an Audi car? Where are the people who recently bought, annually travel to Mexico on vacation? If they can find those individuals on your, using your apps, and you can surface and make it possible for the buyers to see that, I think that's incredibly valuable. So anything you can to surface who your users are, those IDs, I think that is by far the most important attribute of the audiences that you offer, of the inventory.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that it's about being able to identify across apps. So Millennial doesn't sell apps, right? We don't sell, you can buy XYZ app or ABC app. We sell audiences. And that audience can be found across any one of your apps or your sites that you've built. And that's incredibly important. So there was a gentleman up here, and I'm sorry, I forget his name, who built the calculator. Well, I may be using that calculator and be booking a trip to wherever. An advertiser would never say, oh, I need to be on that calculator app because that's where I'm going to reach travel people. But maybe I'm using it to do conversion of currency. Never know. So passing that information is extraordinarily important.
Yeah, and we're seeing that value kind of flipping it, where I'm sure a lot of you kind of have some sense of who your users are, but we're working with developers to tell them really what are your users buying in the real world? What are the top CPG categories, or what are the top auto makes and models that they're buying today? And that's been really valuable for kind of, a lot of the brands we work with get that insight, but to have developers see it is pretty new.
Yeah, and John, just to stay with you for a second, we hear a lot about data and the value of targeting. I reached the right person. But Datalogix and companies, your competitors, also provide measurement, right? Yep. So they really go hand in hand. So if you could just speak a little bit about how the agencies view both targeting and measurement as part of a campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I think they kind of need both. There's a lot of different things you can do in targeting, but for them, measurement means sales. Am I driving sales with my campaign? And then they go back and they look at different targeting tactics. Maybe location is right for this campaign, or maybe it's the types of apps that they're using. Maybe games are driving higher engagement than news apps, something like that. But as long as that they're looking at the same currency is what's most important.
Yeah, and Jim, you live in San Francisco. You obviously talk to lots of developers out there. Are there certain themes around data? Well, that'll wake everybody up.
I heard San Francisco, and I just couldn't resist it.
Are there certain themes around data, or the types of data that are important, or that there's a growing sense of these are what we need to start surfacing, or these are new types of data that we can surface that would become more valuable to the ad ecosystem?
Yeah. I think most mobile apps now, kind of by definition, are location apps. And kind of coming back, just one of your points was how to introduce that location value proposition into the app. And there are tons of interesting ways to do that. Like even things like, we worked on an app with a big pharmacy where you're walking by the pharmacy and it can go off and check their prescription API and then push you a nudge to come into the store to remind you to pick up your prescription. That's an example of something that's very personalized for me, but it's dealing in this kind of geofencing and region monitoring kind of thing. I think all of these apps, that are capturing this stream of kind of raw latitude and longitude, the challenge is really how to take that stream and derive some value back to the end user, as well as value, in terms of monetization, and things like taking that latitude and longitude and figuring out what businesses that are nearby it, for instance, or looking at what are the kind of actionable places that device could go within a certain walk time, or what is the kind of demographic makeup or consumer spend kind of makeup of that neighborhood that device is occupying. I think there's so many data sets that can be overlaid once you have that kind of primary key of latitude and longitude.
Yeah, so clearly there, if you guys haven't realized, there are some biases here, right? So Mike is biased towards a device ID, Jim is biased towards location. John, do you have a data bias?
Yeah, and it's email, it's registration data. I mean, that is the gold standard, right?
Hold on. There you go.
No, but when we work with, frankly, and then I hope you don't take offense to this, Len, but some of our most sophisticated media partners, the likes of Facebook and Twitter, and they're driving a lot of value because they have essentially identity networks, right? When you're on Amazon or you're on Apple and you're that logged in experience, they can do a tremendous amount with it. So what we do in partnership with Millennial is go out and work with developers like you guys to aggregate an identity network. If I get 1 million emails here, 2 million here, 3 million here, I can put that together into a pool that's large enough where I can then turn to somebody like Kraft and say, well, you want macaroni and cheese buyers? Yeah, we can actually find them through somebody like Millennial across literally thousands of apps.
On a one-to-one basis.
On a one-to-one basis, and then you can actually, we can then measure that campaign and prove out, you know what? Actually, these long-tail apps are performing as well as something like a Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah, makes sense. So we're coming up on getting close here to finishing up. Mike, what one piece of advice would you give to developers when they're thinking about data and how data can monetize for them? Is there one nugget that you want them to walk away from this panel with?
I mean, I would say, I know a lot of you guys think of yourselves probably as on the sell side, and sellers of your audiences, but I think it's very clear that some of the most successful folks right now in the mobile and on the buy side of mobile are actually, frankly, other developers. So I think the one piece of advice I would give you is there's no better way to understand the value of your audiences than if you actually go out and try to act as a buyer of audiences yourselves. I'm not a developer, but I would imagine it's really important to you guys to grow your audiences and grow the footprint of your apps. There's certainly a kind of a war for real estate going on, in terms of number of apps we can have on our phone. Engage in these markets, because the greatest thing that anyone who's selling an app has is the ability to look at the full circle. Mm-hmm. You can actually figure out what the customer lifetime value is of your users, and then you can actually track the cost of the media that you're buying. And you actually are able to really understand, I think, the buying process.
And get to an ROI.
And get to an ROI in a way that other folks need to work with Datalogix to figure out who's going to buy a car. As mobile app developers, you guys are uniquely positioned. So strongly encourage you to actually engage in building out your audiences as buyers.
Is there anybody here who uses internal analytics?
How many of you are buying as well? How many of you are buyers out here as well as sellers?
Know who your audience is?
Okay.
Yeah, just a few. So Mike will be here for a little while longer.
Yeah.
He has to catch a plane.
I can help both.
Feel free to track him down. John, same question.
Back to the advice question. Yeah. I would say, look, this is clearly the direction the whole market is moving, is more granular data, just more of it in general. Don't sit on the sidelines. Get in the game. I know a lot of you you're stewards of your consumer, and you don't want to create a bad customer experience, but provide notice and choice about what you're doing, and then get in the game. But do it choosing partners that you trust and are going to be good stewards of that data and protect your customers as well.
All right, Jim, bring us home.
Well, I think there's a common thread here, and that is, what is the context and derived data that you can get from a simple piece of information, whether it's an email address or kind of multi-vector analytics where you're deriving new insight, or location where you're deriving new insight out of that bit of data. And I think as the app developer, there's an opportunity for you as the steward of that data to begin to create and identify those meanings and those patterns, and then use networks to build your audiences out.
All right, thank you. So we've got maybe a minute. Any questions? Hi, Kelly. All right, 5 minutes. So I've got to
wasn't a
stall for
question.
5 minutes now? Is the music going to start? All the way in the back.
So a lot of the times publishers will see monetization and user experience as two forces that are not opposite of each other. Could you talk about how they can actually be used to help each other out?
Can I take a swing at that? You guys
Go
may-
for it.
So there's a guy who ran a company called Ad Colony, which recently got acquired, I think, by Awkward Media Works. They did a lot of video experiences, and one thing he said to me was, there's two types of ad experiences you can have. Or when you're in an app, there's the lean forward and the lean back. And no one likes to get an ad popping up while they're trying to get directions or they're trying to get somewhere. That's annoying. But if you can think about user experience and you can actually place those ad experiences, at the end of a level up or at the right stopping point in a game, if it's Words with Friends or I think they actually don't need to be in tension. In fact, I think they can be synergistic, and you'll probably find that click-through rates or whatever performance metric you're looking at will go up dramatically if you actually align those things for when people are ready for a break. So there are folks out there. I would just say get help, because being an app developer, you may not know all of the research that's gone into advertising. Talk to some experts.
Leverage Millennial, leverage
talk to
Matt,
Millennial.
leverage Lewis, leverage Ollie, leverage the Millennial team. We've been doing this. Paul, who's here, we invented mobile advertising for all intents and purposes. Leverage the 7 or 8 years of knowledge, institutional knowledge that's in this room. That's exactly what this forum is for. All right. Anybody else? Bill.
Hey, John, you mentioned that example about Craft.
Yeah.
And I was curious, how concerned is Craft with where that ad is delivering versus reaching the right user?
It is always a balance for them. They'll run some campaigns are still bought to take over the Yahoo homepage today, right? And people are still going to buy the Super Bowl. But when they think about programmatic buys, it really is about finding the right user and really, who's going to buy my product, and it doesn't matter as much where they are. Yeah, but part of the things we're looking into study is, well, what are the other factors that contribute to a buy? Is it creative size? Is it time of day? Is it device type? Do tablets perform better than the smartphones? Those types of things are where Datalogix is really interested in learning more.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so the concern, I guess, as a publisher sharing more and more data with people like you is you're basically building profiles of our users and basically giving ammunition to programmatic buyers to buy our audience on other apps and therefore starting our revenue stream. So that, I don't know how real that is, but conceptually it feels like that is something that can happen, right?
Yeah, it's a fair question, but when the types of data we're getting are not about your users. Like, we're not categorizing them as a casual gamer or as a mom because of your data. We're just looking to make a one-to-one link. So, eventually we're going to build out a one-to-one connection with all mobile users. So they're not as much your users to be retargeted elsewhere. They're mobile users in their households that we have a whole bunch of offline data on. Does that make sense? To some degree, we can debate it later.
Yeah, because like a new publisher that may not have as high of an expectation in terms of revenue, they can just lower their eCPMs and just accept any bids for impressions at a much lower price than I'm expecting, and therefore they're sucking the demand. They're basically drawing the demand towards themselves.
Well, when you're participating in that type of net, like you're providing the high quality data, say it's an email address, that overlap of those users is going to be far higher on your network than it is going to be elsewhere.
James.
I feel like this industry right now is still very much surrounded by CTR and driven by CTR. Do you find that, I find that with data, you can kind of battle that CTR issue by saying you're hitting an audience, not necessarily driving engagement. Do you see advertisers changing their view on the way that they spend on mobile to view hitting an audience as opposed to hitting a click?
Yeah, I think everybody says they want to ignore CTR and then they don't, right? Because there's no other metric that they can get on a daily or weekly basis. So until it's kind of the onus is on companies like Datalogix and our peers to come out with things that they can use to optimize throughout the campaign. Because nobody likes it, but Look, a lot of we deliver measurement 30 days at the end of a campaign. Like that's too long for companies, but we'll get there.
I think some publishers are changing. The Financial Times, a client of ours, has moved towards increasingly looking at attention, engagement. And I think the IAB obviously is trying to do some work around things like viewability. So it's changing, but I think the point is, the problem is you need a currency and you need a standard. And let's face it, Nielsen wouldn't be in business right now. They're there because people are just used to buying.
They've accepted it.
Yeah, people are used to buying Nielsen, as their currency. So something will emerge. It's got to change, and hopefully that will reward a lot of you guys who are building highly engaging apps and not just ones that people click around on.
There are on the pure kind of location side for performance campaigns, there are a lot of different companies that are looking at things like geofencing to measure returns into a store. So I saw an ad unit over here, and maybe the next day or later that day I entered the store against that campaign. So trying to create those linkages. But back to your point, it's what are the metrics and what are the kind of common standard metrics across the industry.
All right. Kelly, one last question.
Paul's got a question.
Oh, Paul's got a question. Sorry, everybody. Paul's got a question.
I guess from each of you, what is each of your most underutilized data asset that you sort of have and you think there's opportunity for it? What's underutilized within your data sets?
I will say that these markets are so new and so immature that I'll give an example of one particular piece of data. So, right now you have these are marketplaces, and you have real-time auctions, and for a given auction that's generated in one of these RTV marketplaces, you may have a number of bids that can occur, and the density of bidding, the demand for a particular impression can vary pretty dramatically. And so by and large, I would say there's not a lot of sophistication in terms of both on the publisher side, people elevating their prices in response to demand signal, or on the buy side, buyers sort of modulating their pricing based on what they see with overall sort of market dynamics. So there's a lot of underlying market data around bid density, pricing fluctuations, time of day. Most campaigns burn out by 3 p.m. and then pricing drops, right? So as publishers, there's a lot of things you could do to take advantage of market dynamics to actually make more money. Very simple things. And likewise, buyers could do the same. So I would say, like, market intelligence. It's so early. Most people are just yelling $1, $1, $1, $1, $1 in this market where, So that's what I would say is underutilized.
For us, it's audience profiling. I think very few people know we have the capability to just take on a whole bunch of mobile IDs and spit back tons of information about your users very, very quickly. We just don't promote it. So I can talk to you about it later if you're interested.
Yeah, so on the
I'm
pub
glad you finally
side,
mentioned it at the end of the panel.
right. So on the advertiser side, that makes a ton of sense. I want to find so-and-so, and they're asking for a target audience.
Sure.
But there's the inverse of that,
Right.
which is, hey, I'm a developer. Tell me who's coming to my app.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's really
What
important.
is it moms?
So John will
is it
be on the
kids,
boat.
Demographics. Yeah.
John will be on the cruise.
Find me on the boat.
Find him on the cruise. Jim?
And, mine would maybe be, so think about kind of a crawl, walk, run. The run would be, so if the crawl is kind of some of the things we're doing today, which is this kind of stateless location observation, what's around this device based on this one observation. Walk is really, that kind of stateful stream off of that one device. And then run is an interesting opportunity where you're aggregating multiple devices and multiple location observations so that you're then building profiles for places, for instance.
Right.
And all kinds of things. You're taking the aggregates of those data and building some really insight there.
Right, like a temporal tapestry.
For instance.
Yeah. All right. On that note, Kelly's giving me the hook. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mike, John, and Jim. Appreciate it.